What if I told you there's a rally car so violent, so uncontrollable, that it literally killed an entire racing category? Not just ended it, murdered it in a flaming wreck on a Corsican mountainside. This is the story of the Lancia Delta S4, the twin-charged monster that pushed human reflexes past their breaking point. Picture this. It's May 2nd, 1986, the Tour de Corse. They call it the Rally of 10,000 Corners. Henri Toivonen, Finland's rising star, is threading his Delta S4 through the narrow mountain roads at speeds that shouldn't be possible. His co-driver Sergio Cresto is calling pace notes, trying to keep up with the blur outside. They're averaging over 75 miles per hour on roads barely wider than the car itself. Then, on the Corte Taverna stage, something goes wrong. Maybe a pace note misread, maybe a moment's inattention, maybe the car just decided it had enough. The S4 leaves the road at full speed, tumbles down a ravine, and explodes into a fireball visible from the next mountain over. By the time marshals reach the wreck, there's nothing left but twisted tubes and ash. Two of rallying's brightest talents gone in seconds. And with them, the wildest era in motorsport history. The Lancia Delta S4 wasn't just another Group B car, it was Group B pushed to its logical, terrifying conclusion. See, Group B had simple rules. Build 200 road cars, then do whatever you want for racing. That's it. No power limits, no weight minimums, no restrictions on boost, materials, or technology. The only limit was human courage, and as it turned out, human reaction time. To understand why Lancia built something so extreme, we need to travel back to 1982. The FIA had just created Group B to revitalize rallying. Television audiences were growing, manufacturers wanted in, and everyone agreed. Faster meant better. Audi showed up first with their Quattro, bringing all-wheel drive to rallying. Suddenly, 300 horsepower wasn't slipping and sliding. It was hooking up and launching. Peugeot responded with the 205 T16, a mid-engine rocket that made the Quattro look agricultural. Ford had their RS200. Austin Rover built the Metro 6R4. And Lancia? Lancia had won more rallies than anyone, but their front-drive 037 was getting demolished by these all-wheel drive monsters. So Lancia didn't just join the arms race, they brought a nuclear weapon. The Delta S4 project started in late 1983 with one goal: build the fastest rally car ever conceived. They'd take zero shortcuts, spare no expense, and push every regulation to its absolute limit. Here's where it gets interesting. While everyone else was turbocharging for big power, Lancia's engineers identified the fatal flaw: turbo lag. In rallying, you're constantly on and off the throttle, navigating hairpins and chicanes. Every time you lift, the turbo spools down. Every time you get back on it, you wait precious seconds for boost to build. On a stage with 50 corners, that's 50 dead spots in your power band. Lancia's solution was elegant and insane. Use both supercharging and turbocharging on the same engine. The supercharger, belt-driven instant response, would handle low RPM. The turbo would take over up high. They'd overlap in the middle, creating a seamless wall of boost from idle to redline. No lag, no dead spots. Just violent, endless acceleration. The engine itself was a work of art. Starting with a 1,759cc inline-4, they added a Abarth Volumex supercharger and a KKK turbocharger. The block was cast iron for strength, topped with an aluminum 16-valve head. Compression ratio was dropped to 7.5.1 to handle the boost, up to 5 bar in qualifying trim. That's 72 psi. Most modern performance cars run 15 psi and call it aggressive. Let me put that in perspective. At full boost, this 1.8-liter engine was cramming in the same amount of air as a naturally aspirated 7-liter V8. The supercharger alone could push 0.5 bar from idle. The turbo would start contributing around 2,500 RPM. By 4,000 RPM, both were working together, shoving air into the combustion chambers at pressures that would destroy most engines in seconds. The fuel system was equally extreme. Twin Weber injection systems, one for the supercharger circuit, one for the turbo. Fuel pressure at 8 bar just to keep up with demand. They were burning through 50 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers at full attack. That's 4.7 miles per gallon. In a hatchback. Power output depended on who was asking. For homologation, Lancia claimed 250 horsepower. For rallying, they admitted to 450. In qualifying trim, with the boost turned up and special fuel, insiders say it was pushing 550 horsepower from 1.8 liters in 1985. But here's the thing about 550 horsepower. It's meaningless without traction. So Lancia gave the S4 a sophisticated all-wheel drive system with 3 differentials, front, center, and rear. The center diff was an epicyclic type with viscous coupling, automatically varying torque split based on wheel slip. Under acceleration, it could send 75% of power to the rear. Under braking, it shifted forward for stability. The suspension was double wishbones all around, with remote reservoir Bilstein dampers and adjustable anti-roll bars. Nothing revolutionary, but perfectly executed. The real innovation was the chassis itself. While the road-going Delta was a unibody hatchback, the S4 was a pure prototype. They built a chromoly space frame, then draped lightweight composite panels over it. The entire body, doors, hood, fenders, roof, was either fiberglass or Kevlar composite. The wheelbase was shortened by 50 mm compared to the road car. Track was widened by 140 mm. The result looked vaguely like a Delta if you squinted, but dimensionally it shared nothing. This was a purpose-built race car wearing a costume. Weight came in at just 890 kilograms, 1,962 pounds. Think about that. 550 horsepower in something that weighs less than a modern Mazda Miata. The power-to-weight ratio was 617 horsepower per ton. A modern Bugatti Chiron with its 1,479 horsepower and $3 million price tag, 547 horsepower per ton. Performance was beyond anything rallying had seen. 0 to 60 miles per hour took 2.3 seconds on gravel. On tarmac with slicks, engineers claimed it would do it in under 2 seconds. This was 1985, remember? The Ferrari F40 wouldn't exist for another 2 years, and it needed 3.8 seconds to hit 60. The quarter mile? 10.5 seconds at 135 miles per hour, again on gravel. Top speed was largely academic in rallying, but Lancia claimed 140 miles per hour, limited by gearing, not power. With taller ratios, engineers calculated it could exceed 165. But raw speed wasn't what made the S4 terrifying. It was how it delivered that speed. Test driver Marco Allen described it. The acceleration was so violent your vision would blur, not from vibration, from your eyeballs deforming under G-force. The twin-charged engine had no power curve. It was a power wall. Floor the throttle at any RPM, in any gear, and the car would try to tear itself free from the earth. The S4 made its competition debut at the end of 1985, winning the RAC rally in Britain with Henri Toivonen driving. He dominated, winning by over 2 minutes. Observers were stunned. The Peugeot 205 T16 had seemed unbeatable, but the S4 made it look slow. The 1986 season started brilliantly. Toivonen won in Monte Carlo. Allen took Portugal. The S4 was on pace to dominate Group B's final year. Then came Corsica. The Tour de Corse was always dangerous. Hundreds of miles of mountain roads lined with trees, rocks, and 1,000-foot drops. No room for error. Spectators stood inches from the racing line, moving at the last possible second as cars flew past at 100 miles per hour. On that May morning, Toivonen was leading his class, pushing hard as always. The S4 was in its element, the twin-charged engine singing, all 4 wheels clawing at the tarmac. They entered a left-hand bend on the Corte Taverna stage, traveling at approximately 75 miles per hour. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. The car failed to turn, either from driver error or mechanical failure. We'll never know. It left the road at unabated speed, launched off a small embankment, and cartwheeled down the hillside. The composite fuel tank, located behind the seats for weight distribution, ruptured on impact. Group B cars carried 90 liters of fuel, 24 gallons, in their main tanks. The S4's tank was made of lightweight composite, not rubber or metal. When it split, fuel atomized instantly in the hot engine bay. The supercharger was glowing red from heat. The turbo was even hotter. Ignition was instantaneous. The fireball was visible for miles. By the time marshals descended the ravine, the S4 had burned so completely that investigators couldn't determine the cause of the crash. Toivonen and Cresto were identified only by their dental records. The chromoly space frame had melted. The engine block had partially liquefied. The footage, grainy, shot from across the valley, showed a pillar of black smoke rising from the ravine. No dramatic action shots, no heroic rescue attempts, just smoke and the horrible realization that 2 more had died for entertainment. But wait, there's more. The very next day, while Corsica was still processing Toivonen's death, another Group B car crashed. This time, it was the Ford RS200 of Mark Surer. He survived, but his co-driver Michel Wider suffered severe injuries. 2 crashes, 3 casualties, 24 hours. Group B had finally gone too far. Within a week, FISA, the FIA's sporting arm, announced that Group B would end after the 1986 season. No grandfathering, no transition period, just done. Manufacturers had spent millions developing these cars, and now they were instant museum pieces. Think about that for a second. These companies, Lancia, Audi, Peugeot, Ford, had poured astronomical sums into Group B programs. Lancia alone had spent an estimated $50 million on the S4 project. That's $140 million in today's money for a rally car. And now they were told, stop, immediately. The manufacturers were furious but powerless. Jean Todt, running Peugeot's program, called it a betrayal of investment. Cesare Fiorio at Lancia was more philosophical. Perhaps we had built cars that were too good at their job. The S4 soldiered on through 1986, winning more rallies, but everyone knew it was dead car racing. Marco Allen won in Greece. Mickey Biasion took Argentina. Every victory felt hollow, celebrated under the shadow of Toivonen's death. The final Group B event was the Olympus Rally in December 1986. After that, the S4 and its rivals were banned from international competition. Some found second lives in Pikes Peak or Rallycross. Most went to museums or private collections. The revolution was over. So what was actually going wrong? Why did these cars keep killing people? The answer wasn't one thing, it was everything. The cars had outpaced human reflexes. Drivers were making decisions in milliseconds that used to take seconds. The margin for error had shrunk to 0. Consider the physics. At 100 miles per hour, you're covering 147 feet per second. Human reaction time is about 0.25 seconds at best. That means you've traveled 37 feet before your brain even processes danger. In the S4, with its instant power delivery, a tiny throttle input could break traction and send you sideways. By the time you recognized the slide, you were already backward, or airborne, or wrapped around a tree. The courses made things worse. Rally stages weren't racetracks with runoff areas and safety barriers. They were public roads, narrow, crowned, often poorly maintained. Trees and rocks lined the racing line. Drops of hundreds of feet were common. And the spectators, here's the thing about Group B spectators, they weren't behind barriers or in grandstands. They stood on the road itself, jumping back as cars approached. They'd reach out to touch the cars as they passed. They'd stand on the outside of corners, exactly where a car would go if it understeered. It was insanity, tolerated because it hadn't gone wrong. Yet. The cars themselves were death traps, disguised as hatchbacks. The S4's composite fuel tank was lighter than a conventional rubber cell, but it couldn't deform in a crash. It would crack like an egg, spilling fuel onto components hot enough to cause instant ignition. The tubular chassis was strong but had no crumple zones. In a frontal impact, the engine would come through the firewall. In a side impact, there was nothing but a thin door between the driver and disaster. Safety equipment was laughably inadequate. Drivers wore helmets and four-point harnesses. That's it. No head and neck restraints, no fire suppression systems, no reinforced survival cells. The co-driver sat with pace notes on his lap and a map light, calling corners while forces tried to tear his head off. But the real problem wasn't technical, it was psychological. Group B had created an arms race where winning meant pushing past prudence. Every manufacturer knew the cars were too fast. Every driver knew the risks. But nobody wanted to be the first to back down. It was a game of chicken played at 150 miles per hour. The S4 represented the apex of this madness. The twin-charged engine wasn't just powerful, it was unpredictable. Boost came in waves, surging and dropping as the supercharger and turbo traded duties. Drivers had to memorize not just the course, but the engine's behavior at every RPM in every gear. One missed shift, one moment of confusion, and you were a passenger in a guided missile. Toivonen himself had been ambivalent about the car. In interviews before his death, he praised its speed but admitted it scared him. "Sometimes," he said, "I feel like I'm not driving the car, I'm negotiating with it, asking permission to survive each corner." His death wasn't even the first warning. 2 months earlier, Portuguese driver Joaquim Santos had died in his Ford RS200 during the Rally de Portugal. The car had left the road and plowed into spectators, killing 3 and injuring dozens. The footage was horrific. Bodies flying through the air, the RS200 tumbling through the crowd. Portugal was immediately struck from the calendar. The writing was on the wall. Either Group B would end, or it would end rallying entirely. The FIA chose preservation over progress. Group A regulations, production-based, limited power, strict safety requirements, replaced Group B for 1987. Suddenly, rally cars had 300 horsepower instead of 500. They weighed 1,230 kilograms instead of 890. They were fast but not frightening, safe but not spectacular. The S4's competition legacy is brief but brilliant. In its 15-month career, it won 7 World Rally Championship events. It took 26 podium finishes from 35 starts. Lancia won the 1986 Manufacturers' Championship, their last before withdrawing from rallying in 1992. But statistics don't capture what the S4 represented. This was engineering unleashed, freed from the constraints of sanity. Every component was pushed to its theoretical limit. The engine operated at pressures that would destroy modern motors. The chassis was so stiff it would transmit every pebble to the driver's spine. The aerodynamics generated enough downforce to drive upside down at 80 miles per hour, if you could find an inverted road. The development story itself is worth examining. Lancia's engineers, led by Inger Lombardi and Claudio Lombardi, started with a clean sheet in 1983. They knew turbocharging was mandatory for Group B power levels, but they also knew its limitations. The twin charging solution came from aircraft technology. Supercharged radial engines had used similar systems in World War II fighters. The challenge was packaging. Fitting a supercharger and a turbocharger, plus their associated plumbing, into a compact engine bay required 3D modeling that barely existed in 1983. Engineers built physical mock-ups from cardboard and wire, testing clearances by hand. The final layout was so tight that changing spark plugs required removing the supercharger. The transmission was equally special. Hewland built a bespoke 6-speed sequential gearbox that could handle the massive torque spikes from the twin-charged engine. Gear changes took 50 milliseconds, faster than a human blink. The clutch was a triple-plate carbon unit that could transmit 600 Nm of torque while weighing just 4 kilograms. Even the wheels were revolutionary. Speedline created magnesium alloys specifically for the S4, each wheel weighing just 4.5 kilograms despite being 16 inches in diameter. The tires, Pirelli P7s, designed for Group B, could generate 1.4 g of lateral acceleration on tarmac. For comparison, a modern Porsche 911 GT3 pulls 1.2 g. The cost was astronomical even by racing standards. Each S4 chassis cost approximately $400,000. To build in 1985, over $1.1 million today. The engines, rebuilt after every event, cost $50,000 each. A season's worth of spare parts and support equipment pushed the per-car budget past $2 million. Lancia was essentially burning money for glory. The road car, required for homologation, was a different beast entirely. Lancia built exactly 200 Delta S4 straight-aisles, the minimum required. These were detuned to 250 horsepower, fitted with luxuries like sound deadening and a radio. They were still twin-charged, still all-wheel drive, still completely impractical. Driving a straight-aisle was apparently terrifying even at legal speeds. The clutch was binary, engaged or not, nothing between. The steering was so direct that breathing on the wheel changed direction. The ride was harsh enough to loosen fillings. And the engine, even detuned, would chirp all 4 tires in third gear. Today, those 200 straight-aisles are among the most valuable rally homologation cars ever built. Clean examples sell for over $500,000. Competition S4s, when they rarely appear at auction, command 7 figures. The car that killed Group B has become a $1 million monument to excess. The S4's influence extends far beyond its competition record. The twin-charging concept, considered too complex for production in 1985, eventually found its way into road cars. Volkswagen's TSI engines use a similar principle. Volvo's T6 power plant employs both supercharging and turbocharging. The S4 proved the concept worked, even if it worked too well. The all-wheel drive system pioneered technologies now standard in performance cars. The variable center differential, electronic torque management, the integration of ABS with traction control, all were tested in anger on the S4. When you see a modern Audi RS model dancing through corners, you're watching S4 DNA at work. Even the safety lessons weren't wasted. The S4's violent death led directly to modern rally safety standards. Roll cages became survival cells. Fuel tanks gained rubber bladders and automatic cutoffs. Fire suppression systems became mandatory. Head and neck restraints were developed. Routes were modified to increase runoff. Spectator control became paramount. Modern World Rally Championship cars are faster than Group B ever was, at least on stage times. But they achieve it safely, repeatedly, without killing their drivers. The sport learned from the S4's funeral pyre. There's a philosophical question buried in the S4's story. Should we build something just because we can? Lancia's engineers could create a 550 horsepower, twin-charged monster that defied physics. But should they have? The car worked exactly as designed. It was the fastest, most advanced rally car ever built. It won races, broke records, pushed boundaries. It also killed 2 good men and ended an era. The answer depends on your perspective. From an engineering standpoint, the S4 was perfection. Every system optimized, every component purposeful. From a human standpoint, it was hubris made manifest, a machine that exceeded our ability to control it. Perhaps that's why we're still fascinated by the S4 and its Group B siblings. They represent a moment when technology outpaced judgment, when winning mattered more than surviving. They were the automotive equivalent of Icarus, flying too close to the sun on wings of carbon fiber and boost. The S4 remains controversial even among rally fans. Some see it as the ultimate expression of motorsport engineering. Others view it as a cautionary tale about unchecked ambition. Both are right. The S4 was simultaneously rallying's greatest achievement and its greatest failure. In the end, the Lancia Delta S4 died as it lived, violently, spectacularly, taking others with it. It achieved immortality through infamy, becoming the poster child for an era that went too far. Every safety regulation in modern motorsport carries a piece of Toivonen and Cresto's legacy. Every horsepower restriction, every chassis requirement, every spectator barrier exists because the S4 proved what happens without them. The twin-charged monster sleeps now in museums and private collections, its volcanic engine silent, its potential forever leashed. Visitors stare at its boxy shape, struggling to reconcile the mundane appearance with the legendary performance. How could something that looks like a shopping car be so deadly? But those who know, who remember the banshee wail of the supercharger mixing with the turbo's whistle, who felt the ground shake as it passed, who watched it dance on the edge of physics, they understand. The S4 wasn't just a car. It was rallying's beautiful nightmare, a four-wheeled fever dream that burned too bright and took the sport's innocence with it. What do you think about Group B? Was it racing's greatest era or a mistake that should never have happened? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more stories about the machines that changed motorsport forever, the ones that were too fast, too dangerous, or just too incredible for their own good, make sure to subscribe. Because trust me, the S4 was just one monster in a whole generation of them. Until next time, keep that boost under control.